living tiny finally. How to legally live in a tiny home in Ontario. Certifications, bylaws, and more. We're glad to have Bianca Metz here with us from the Giving Tree Tiny Home Consultancy. She's a co-producer of the show and an activist who works with municipalities to promote tiny living. If you're looking at regulations, bylaws, certifications for tiny homes, these can get a little confusing and sometimes feel like another language. Thankfully, we've got Bianca here who speaks the language, and she'll be able to translate what all of that means. We've got about 45 minutes and a little bit on time, and there's going to be some time for questions at the end. So if we can give a round of applause for Bianca, we'll get started.
Hello everyone. I'm going to put my water down across the stage. Okay. So, I didn't know whether I was going to do this or not, but I'm just going to do it because a lot of people in this room who know me know that I am nothing but honest. So I'm going to give you a real quick story about the bad side of tiny living. Our house got broken into last night. Yeah. Somebody moved in within 4 hours, broke in, put my clothes on, put all my makeup on, ate my food, slept in my bed, and well, my husband was there as well, our bed. And we had to call the police, so I was up until midnight last night and then slept in a hotel. So I'm here today, getting through, sharing with you that story. So in case I don't see my usual perky self, I'm going to remain perky. So, but we're going to move into all the good of tiny living. I'm going to tell you all the amazing things. So one thing I do recommend is get a security system if you're going to live in the forest. Yes, for security systems. Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Bianca Metz. I am the co-founder of the Tiny Home Show with my business partner Maria, who runs Tiny Homes in Canada. We designed this show specifically to amplify this movement, to give it a voice, to help folks like you find a solution to affordable housing, and I'm air quoting that now because really what is affordable housing? We designed this show around finding solutions for anyone at any age. We have tried to gather a community of people who really believe in this, who believe in a small footprint, who believe in sustainable living, who believe in what that community really means, and are putting faith in that. And so here I am 5 years later after starting my business, which is the Giving Tree Consultancy, which is very, very mainly what I'll be speaking about today. And I'm going to show you and teach you how to live tiny. So we're going to talk about a bunch of different things today, but I'm going to start with my story. I always love to kind of set the foundation with this presentation by sharing with you how exactly I got to tiny living and what it has done to transform our life, because I just think it's beautiful what it can do. So, again, here I am on my tiny home countertop. I'm a tiny house consultant. I am a co-producer of the Tiny Home Show, sustainable living specialist and downsizing specialist. Like any millennial entrepreneur, I get to leave out titles for myself, so those are the ones that I have chosen. Downsizing is it was a really profound experience for me and for my partner and our son Bodhi. So that is our tiny house there, and nestled in the middle of the woods. We have about 6 acres that we land lease, and we have a greenhouse there, bees and chickens on the property. And we downsized into this tiny house from a condo. So we were living in a condo in the south of Guelph, very disillusioned to the cost of that. We were probably spending $3,000 plus a month, which, I mean, from what I hear what my friends are paying is peanuts, apparently. And so I'm thinking to myself, well, I can barely do it then. How is anyone doing it now? So we ended up just putting all our cards in one basket. I found this house on Kijiji. I do not recommend buying a home on Kijiji. But again, this was 6 years ago when the movement had just began. Well, in Ontario, really. I'm going to rephrase that. When I discovered tiny homes, about 6 years ago. So we bought this for $60,000 on Kijiji. And we moved it to this property because we had a really beautiful opportunity to live in land stewardship and to work on this property and to give back to the property. And there's a big symbiotic relationship that we have with it. So, once we started this though, I brought my journey online. And of course, as anyone puts themselves online, you will get the good, the bad, and the ugly with everyone. And there was so much of all of those, but then there was this one But I thought to myself, well, yeah, okay, so how can I share this really beautiful lifestyle and this tiny home and this parenting, and our son was 1.5 years, and I was sharing all of this, and there really wasn't any legitimate way to do so. And so I discovered very quickly that I felt like a fraud. It didn't feel good, it didn't sit well with me. So after that, sitting with those feelings for a while, I decided, okay, you know what, I'm going to do something about this. And so I did something I never thought I would do, which is really enjoy reading zoning bylaws. And so I dug into the zoning bylaws, I dug into policy, I just basically looked at everything from a really outsider's perspective and thought, okay, so we have a lot of these mechanisms to put houses on land. How could we use one of those mechanisms to put houses on land that you own on land you don't own? And so through a lot of arduous research, I created this framework that was developed out of what is called the temporary use bylaw. And I'll get into that a little bit later because I like to start off everything nice and fluffy, and I'm going to fire hose you with information. And I use this term quite a bit because you're going to leave here and you're going to say, oh my gosh, that was a lot of information. But you're here and I want to give you information. So, just a couple little notes about the intention of living tiny. So, a big reason why our family downsized into a tiny home was, again, because we're disillusioned with the market, we're not really happy with the conventional lifestyle, the tradition, everything that we're told we're supposed to do, go to school, get a job, buy a house, buy a bigger house, buy a nicer car. We just don't measure success that way. I don't measure success that way. Success is the relationships that I have. Success is, to me, being a good person and being close to my son and having a really strong relationship with my husband. That is what success looks like to me. And so I ended up having our son go 6 weeks early, and everything around me came crashing down. Having a premature baby was the most difficult experience of my life. I guess because I was someone breaking into my house, but that's a close second now. Having Bodhi early completely changed my world, and so I very, very quickly realized that I had put my body under stress because I had to work way too hard for very little, and I was just, excuse my French, very pissed off. So I decided to make a change. So that's our notes again. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to dive into a lot of really dense material today. So we're going to talk about where in Ontario you can lease land for your tiny home. We're going to talk about the zoning bylaw that allows for that framework. We're going to talk about services, utilities, and hookups. I'm going to get in a little bit to on-grid versus off-grid living. And we'll also talk about some of the reasons why it's very important for you to find the land before you buy a house. We're going to get into tiny home types and certification, so I'm going to give you a very big two-full punch of what tiny house you need to buy in order to legally live in Ontario, because that is hands down the biggest mistake that anyone who's entering into this journey will make, is buying the wrong building, choosing the wrong builder, and starting off the journey already on the wrong foot. So we're going to talk about myth versus fact. There's going to be probably a lot of this that comes up in the Q&A, but there is a lot of myth versus fact, specifically for building types, sizing types, and what you need a permit for versus what you don't need a permit for. We're going to talk about then how to talk to your municipality, because one of the biggest roadblocks, and I'm sure most people in this room have encountered this, is my municipality doesn't allow it. And likely the reason your municipality doesn't allow it is because you're asking the wrong question, so you're getting the wrong answer. So I'm going to tell you the right questions to ask, and I'm going to show you the right language to use. Okay, so the Affordable Housing Framework that I developed a few years ago, I just basically termed it as tenant-owned tiny homes. So the framework is tiny homes as tenant-owned secondary dwelling units. So very simply, you own that unit and you lease the land from which it's under on a piece of private property, whether you know the person or not. So the framework is basically surrounded by what is called the Garden Suite bylaw. And the Garden Suite bylaw was traditionally what is called a temporary use bylaw. It's enacted through the Planning Act, which means every municipality in some capacity has to allow this use. It's a permitted use that's not really found under any zone, but it's found within the zoning bylaws. So this specific zoning bylaw and policy, basically what it is, it's called temporary use because you put a building on a piece of property for a specific number of years. Traditionally, this building would have been for a family member or a blood relative, but that was actually taken out of the policy about, well, I don't know, because it's a human rights violation to ask or tell anyone who is in a house, who can live in a home. So when I found this bylaw, I thought, well, why can't, this makes so much sense. The terms of the bylaw is the home has to be modular. That was the first thing, right? Mobile home. The second is that it's termed for a period of years, and I thought, okay, well, that makes sense because people are going to be living on property and they're going to lease the property for maybe 2, maybe 3, maybe 10, who knows, years. So then you can, everything just made sense. Everything, the systems and the hookups and the way that the temp use bylaw worked is everything would have to be connected legally, and everything would be above board. Now, the big roadblock here was that the temp use bylaw is actually quite costly to go through. It's a very, very expensive process because it's termed under what's called a zoning amendment, which means you have to go to council, you have to put up a fight, there's a whole thing. And on a lot of municipalities, it's very expensive. So, for example, Hamilton charges $45,000 for a zoning bylaw amendment. So, to put a garden suite or tiny home on your land here, that's what it would cost. But if you go 30 minutes down the road to a different municipality, the fee might be $1,400. So, as you can see, while I can stand here and say you can use this bylaw, it might be cost prohibitive where you are, and it might not be as easy as it sounds. So, section 1, we're going into tiny modular mobile manufactured homes. I'm going to talk about sizing, types and descriptions, and zoning, because I'd like to talk about the buildings and get a really clear picture of what those are, and then we'll get into the land conversation. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so a quick 1-2 punch guide on sizing. So there have been a few changes according to the Ontario Building Code recently. The big one being the lowest Ontario Building Code compliant habitable size dwelling is 188 square feet. This means that you can live in something as small as 188 square feet anywhere in Ontario. When you are looking in your zoning bylaws for where you live or where you hope to live, this is a flag. So the flag means while this is Ontario Building Code, your municipality might say something different. Your municipality might say, for a principal dwelling, the main home on the property, if, say, you're buying vacant land, might be 600 square feet, the minimum. It might be 1,200 square foot, the minimum. The reason why 188 is there is because it differs to a minimum. So this is the building code, basically differs to a minimum. So, then there's our lovely 160 square foot maximum for accessory structures. We need to be very clear that those are two very different things. So if you've ever heard someone say, actually, no, I won't call you out, you don't have to raise your hand. Have you ever heard somebody say, oh, if it's under 160 square feet, I don't need a permit? I see a couple people nodding. So yes, that's not true. In any way, shape, or form, that is not true. If it is under 160 square feet, you do not need a permit, usually, if it is used for storage, boxes, things are going in there. If it is used for anything else, a studio, an office, a salon, you're changing the use of the structure, which means you likely need a permit if the municipality requires one. Why? Because they need to know the structure's there. They need to know that there's maybe an occupation in the structure, that maybe you're running a salon or, an office or a barber shop or something like that. So while you don't always need a permit for a structure under 160 square feet, that decision belongs to the building department and the municipality. That decision does not belong to the arbitrary, we don't need a permit for this. You cannot live in a dwelling in Ontario under 188 square feet. Do not buy one, do not look at one, do not believe anyone who tells you any different. Okay, and then anything about up to 450, usually around the 600 mark for modular homes. The difference between every other home and modular homes is that modular, mobile, tiny, compass language here, they're moving down the road. It's the only difference. They're going from point A to point B. This matters with zoning, and this matters with how they're permitted and how they're recognized. So again, I'll get into the language in a little bit. You're welcome to take a photo of this, but I'm going to start at the top. So, at the very top of the list for Ontario, for allowances for mobile, modular, tiny homes, and all the language it all kind of means the same thing, but each municipality calls it something different, which is why everyone gets frustrated. So CSA designated tiny homes. CSA is a standard building standard that a lot of builders will use if they're building manufactured homes. About 4 years ago, 2019, Ontario wrote a policy called How to Build or Buy a Tiny Home. The top certification, and then another one a few levels down, were the only two CSA certifications noted in that policy, meaning those are the only two certifications municipalities would recognize for many years. Those two certifications are the CSA 8277, which is a Foundation Series manufactured home. Foundation Series meaning no wheels. But there's another one, the CSA Z240.2.1 and the CSA Z240MH, MH meaning manufactured home. Those two designations, those are not manufactured homes on wheels. So when someone tells you, oh, you can't live in a tiny house on wheels, they're wrong. You have to live in the right tiny house on wheels. You have to live in the properly certified tiny home on wheels, which is the CSA Z240.2.1. Now, to get into the gray area, that policy did not state the MH series. So that means municipalities will just turn a blind eye and say, okay, well, it wasn't written in this policy, so I don't want to look at it. The unfortunate piece is that many builders are building to the MH series. Oh, that's a lie. Then we have what's called, so those are the big standards. We have the Foundation series, then we have the On Wheels series, and then everywhere below that is where you see 90% of the builders building. So if you purchased a home with the other designations, you have likely found it is impossible to get that home certified on land anywhere because there are recreational vehicles. So the CSA Z241 is a seasonal structure. It is meant for 3 seasons. That's how it's built. That's how it's designated. Municipalities will not allow it for full-time living because it is built to the International Building Code and it's built for 3 seasons. It's built for carpets. It's built for that. You're supposed to leave in the winter. So I know a lot of people have purchased these designated types of homes who then struggle with finding a place to put it. Then you have the CSA Z240RV, then you have NOAA certifications, you've got NFPA, you've got all of these recreational vehicle certifications. A lot of the tiny homes on wheels that are built and designed across the province, across the country, are these types of homes. Why? Because it's an easier certification for the builder to obtain. You can have a builder having their home built to the highest compliance, engineer stamp, stunning manufacturing, great building materials, and if they're using the wrong certification, you can't use that house. So, where did that leave Ontario a couple years ago? Well, of course, everyone's wondering, well, tiny homes are allowed, how come we can't use them? The reason we can't use them is because everyone's getting 2 different certifications and no one's buying the right ones. And also municipalities are taking their very sweet time in enacting these bylaws, but sometimes we have to give grace to change and to change takes time. So, then we have this side here. So, about 2 years ago, there was a change to here.
What was the certification you're looking for out of all of the
What's the certification you're looking for out of all of those? So, to have basically no issues with municipalities, you're looking at the 8277, the Z240.2.1, or the dual stage certification process, which I'm about to talk about. The MH series, you want to just double check with your building department that they'll recognize it, because it's pretty much built the same as the .2.1 series. Okay, so 2 years ago, Ontario, no one's building, okay? No one's building modular homes, everyone's complaining, there's no uptake, there's no nothing, they're not legitimate, yada, yada, yada. So what did OBC do, or the powers that be do? They enacted what's called the dual stage certification process for builders. What this means is now a builder in Ontario can build a home in the municipality their facility is in. So say that builder is in Hamilton, the municipality will inspect this home, this unit that's built in their facility, manufactured in their facility. They will inspect it through a series of steps, similarly to just a regular construction build on site. And they will do the electrical and they'll look at everything else. Then the home is built in the city of Hamilton by a builder, right? And say perhaps someone in Collingwood purchased this home. This home would be delivered to Collingwood, and then it would be placed on the land in Collingwood, and it will be re-inspected and certified by the municipality of Collingwood, by Collingwood's building department. And that's the second stage of the dual stage process. So it is a lot more complicated than that, obviously, everything is. So if you do have any questions about the 2-stage certification process, you can talk to any of the designers out on the floor. MW drafting and design can help you. Legal second suites can help you understand that. There's a lot of different people who can help you really get that process going in terms of site assessments and different things. So this is great because this allowed builders who don't have to pay for costly CSA certifications to enter into a market. And so now we have a lot of builders out in the yard, out in the field, who are building to the two-stage program. It's great. So I highly recommend these builders who are local because they're going to be looking at turnkey services for you. They're going to help you assess your land. They're going to help you see if it's possible. They're going to help you with the design. You're limited to size with the two-stage. I think it's 400 square feet is maximum. But everything has a price. Okay. Types of tiny homes. There's tiny homes on wheels. There's tiny homes under site built. There's tiny homes that unit right in the bottom corner. That's a Fritz MH model. So again, it has wheels. And then there are shipping container styles as well. A lot of building departments will see these a bit differently. But again, just find the right build that's right for your project. And if you're specifically looking at land leasing, which a lot of them are going to be, and you're like, well, you know that, I don't have the land. What do I buy? Nothing. Nothing yet, because you don't have the land. But we're going to talk about what you do. How to find land to buy. Next slide, please. Okay, a quick crash course in zoning. Every piece of property in this province has a zoning that's designated to it. Under that zoning has a list of what is called permitted uses. Permitted uses exist for a reason. It's going to tell you what you can do on that piece of land. So, agricultural designated land. You can have a single-family dwelling. You can have a barn. You can have a kennel. You can have a home occupation. You can have a farm health house. These are all permitted uses under a certain designation. You can have in Hamilton residential areas. You can build an interior secondary dwelling unit or an exterior secondary dwelling unit. Detached. You can build a lot of different things. Now, what you're looking for when you're looking to build a tiny house detached on your property is the additional dwelling unit policy. The permitted use for a detached dwelling unit in an accessory structure. So, not every zoning will have this as a permitted use. So you have to check. You have to do your due diligence. There's something called a principal use. So that is typically just the first use on the property, which usually is a single-family dwelling, especially if it's sold for residential purposes. And then there's secondary and accessory uses to a building. So now in Ontario, not by right everywhere, but because of Bill 23, we can now build up to 4 units on a piece of property. So interior suites and exterior suites, exterior attached suites. And then we have the temporary use bylaw, which still exists, but a lot of municipalities are trying to phase it out in favor of the ADU bylaw. Okay, language. So SDU, secondary dwelling unit, ADU, additional dwelling unit, ARU, additional residential unit, SRU, secondary residential unit, you kind of get the picture, second suite, laneway, coach house, garden suite. These are all words that detached accessory structure, detached accessory dwellings, rather, are called or termed. The reason they're called something different everywhere is because they're different use everywhere. We don't really see a lot of garden suite or secondary dwelling units in Toronto. We see more laneways, so they have permissions for laneways. Whereas maybe like a rural area or a rural municipality, for example, wouldn't have a laneway, but because why would they? Not a lot of laneways to go around. So when you're looking at your bylaws, you're really going to want to keep in mind that the secondary dwelling unit bylaw could be living in disguise as one. And especially if you're looking into land leasing, the property you're interested in going to, these are things that whoever's helping you find that property or the property owner will need to go through to see if they can actually host you, because they will need to have one of these permitted uses on their property in order to get a permit for your home. So a few years ago, I started shopping my framework around 2 different municipalities. One county that I was extremely excited about, it was Grey County. So they put a tiny home, they actually put a tiny home definition into their bylaws stating what its intended use was. Now the language has since changed. Here it did very specifically say the tiny house owner can own the unit and enter into a private land lease agreement with the property owner. but it doesn't mean that it's not possible. It doesn't mean that's not still true. The language just changed because that's where they like to do that. So, essentially, the reason I'm bringing this up is because this was a bit of a precedent to say that this policy existed, the language exists somewhere, and I started using this as a benchmark to shop around to other municipalities. So I'll tell you a little bit of a story about the municipality of Erin, and some of the people who I've spoken to and done consulting with in this room will know this story. Myself and a colleague over at MW Drafting and Design went and had a meeting with the city because I shot this around together. They wanted to meet how to understand how to get tiny homes in their area quicker. And so I told them about this policy and how we were hoping to use the temporary use bylaw in order to make this happen, and how can we do that. So give me a very clear picture about how this happens, because that's kind of the next step in the program, is to, now that we've figured out the policy and a lot of other things, how do we get property owners aware that we can do this and we can host you? It's a long road, people. They basically said, well, why are we using a temporary use bylaw? Why can't we just use the ADU bylaw we already have? And so Justin and I kind of sat there shocked, and we thought, well, wouldn't you want to regulate when the houses leave? That makes sense, right? You have all these houses coming in, and someone could just take it out at any moment. They said, honestly, we don't care. We can't regulate that. We can't tell you what to do. As long as the building permit matches, the house is the right house, the hookups are there, that's all we can regulate. So go ahead and do it. Use the ADU bylaw. After that meeting, we kind of looked at each other and went, okay, we were in the same meeting. We got permission to use the additional dwelling unit bylaw for this. Can we assume that most other municipalities, this can just happen anywhere, right? And the answer is yes. The answer is yes. If you've gone to multiple other municipalities, told them about this framework, explained everything to them, and basically said, what is going to stop someone from doing this in the municipality? And the answer is nothing, as long as everything is compliant. The problem, the challenge, is that we don't have the whole framework and process done yet. So everyone in this room, I'm begging patience. We're so close. We've done so much work. Okay, we're going to get into a bit of an explanation on rural and urban lands. May I ask what time it is? It is 10. I am blind. It's 10:20. Okay, you're learning so much about me today. So, urban versus rural lands. We're going to talk about the tiny home bylaw, which I already pretty much talked about, and then where you can go in Ontario. Okay, so when you're looking at finding a piece of property, so I'm going to switch the tone a little bit to a lot of the reason why we're here today, which is to potentially get into a land lease scenario where you buy your own tiny home and put it on someone else's property, again, whether it's your uncle, your grandmother, whoever. You have to keep in mind before you start designing your home, before you start looking in your home, that the big work isn't finding the property. It is building relationships, it's putting yourself out there, it's putting the intention out there, telling people you want to do this. Because there is no framework, there's no website, there is nothing yet that has property owners listed on it that's going to tell you I'm interested. Believe me, I'm getting there. You're going to start where you're at. You're going to start with people you know. You're going to start with family you know. You're going to try that route, and you're going to discuss this dream with them. And while you're doing that, you have to be thinking about the whole picture. And the whole picture means wherever your land is going to be, wherever you're going to go, your house has to match that land. So you can't just go buy a house and hope it fits anywhere. You can't just go buy an off-grid, incinerating toilet, stunning unit like I did, and then hope that it'll fit where it goes. Because you might be required to hook up to septic. There's so many details in zoning bylaws that will say, required to hook up to adequate sewage disposal services, which means a septic. Well, guess what? If grandma lives on the back 40 and she hasn't updated her septic since 1859, she's not going to want you to go digging in there and hooking up to it. So there are, as you can see, so many different roadblocks, and yes, I realize septics do exist back then, but you get my point. So, you want to think about the landscape in which you want to live. If you're looking at rural, know that your tiny house will need most likely a plunge toilet, you'll most likely be needing to hook up to septic, you'll most likely need to hook up to the well. You do have the potential of going further off-grid. You need a good designer, you need a good team, you need a good site plan, and you need an adequate reason as to how to do that. Because unfortunately, off-grid services are still, even though they're covered under the Ontario Building Code in many ways, they're not as highly recognized in many ways. So all of this is done, I will be then putting a lot of my time and attention into how we can get more sustainable units on land quicker, because as someone who does have a composting toilet, it is much easier, it was a lot easier and a lot cheaper to hook up, because I don't have a water output. I have a gray water system. So, when you're living in urban landscapes, most of the time you are required to hook up to municipal services. Actually, mostly 100% of the time you are required to hook up to municipal services. So what happens is people will say, oh, I'm just going to go off-grid. No problem. And then they buy an off-grid home, and then they find a place in an urban area where that's not allowed, because it's written into the bylaws. So, these are just a few types of different services that you can have. My recommendation when going into this, especially if you're looking to land lease and you are interested in designing your house before you find the property, because let's face it, everyone's going to do it anyway, I recommend a hybrid approach. So if you can put propane into your home, that does allow you to be a little more mobile and lenient into, say, for example, if you had all electric. Also, there's a few other things on there, like solar fireplaces. There aren't a whole lot that aren't CC certified or wet certified that you can put into a small modular structure. So there's a few things to just flag on that note. Incinerating toilets, composting toilets are covered under the Ontario Building Code, but they are less recognized and less. It makes municipalities way less excited to have this conversation, because once you go into an off-grid toilet, you have to go into an off-grid or a gray water system. And most, there's a lot of urban lands, especially around here, that are widely protected. So you can imagine that anyone on the greenbelt likely won't get a permit to put in a gray water system, or a potentially dysregulated person if you put in water all over the place. Gray water. Next slide. Okay, how do you do this? This is a very, 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 very 1% short list of the process. I'm going to be very transparent that this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps with a million other things that you need to consider in between. So, find property. Start there. Start with locating a friend, a family, whomever. We're gonna look at the property. We're gonna find the property. Then we're gonna talk to people on the property, and we're gonna see if we like them, if we mesh with them. What do they like? Are they crazy? I have a colleague who is here who found a very lovely lady in a very lovely spot, and it was so wonderful, and then she Googled her name and she ended up being in prison for murdering her husband. So, you want to do your due diligence. Maybe have coffee with these people, go onto their property, do some things. Then, once you have you're settled, you're like, okay, this person maybe is the right person. You don't want to put too many eggs in that basket, because at the same time you're going to want to see if the permission exists on the property. So these two steps, step 2 and 3, are going to exist harmoniously together. Start getting to know the people, have those initial meetings, discuss your intent of everything. So write that out, have an intent, turn it down. What your arrangement looks like, what you're hoping to spend, what type of house you're hoping to bring in, what your services look like, what the relationship looks like, what you can offer in exchange. There are a lot of people who want to age in place who would kill for, well, no, maybe I won't use that term. Oh my God. Sorry, Jay. Who will be very excited to have someone on their property who can help out with the property. Imagine how many elderly parents we have that can age in place on their own property if we had a young, strapping person to help the driveway. So, seeking permission. This land needs to have permission for this. It needs to have the permitted use of a detached accessory structure. Then we go into what's called a site assessment. You'll spend a little bit of money or talk to someone in consultation to be able to know that the property owner kind of takes over from here. Because you can't just go on someone's property and be like, I'm going to do this here, and I'm going to take care of it all. You can't do that. The property owner is entering into a relationship, and entering into a big responsibility. They are still responsible for doing all this work. You have to get a site assessment done. We have to see, just like if they were to build their own secondary dwelling unit, it's the exact same practice across the board. They're going to be building their own secondary dwelling unit, but it's just yours that's coming in. So they need to see the setbacks, the services, where the house can go, what the easements are, all of the things. So the reason being is, and the reason I'm saying this is because so many people just think, oh, I'm just going to put it in the back 40, I'm just going to put it wherever I want. You can't do that. Secondary dwelling units have to be reliant upon the main home. So you won't be able which is disappointing for a lot of people. I get it. I mean, having an off-grid house in the back 40 is stunning, and by all means, if that's what you want to do, you do you. But I'm not saying to do that. We'll cut it there. But again, secondary dwelling units need to be reliant on the main home. That means the services of the main home and the services of the secondary dwelling unit are often shared or split. So your home cannot be as far perhaps as you want it to be. There's usually a maximum and minimum distance that it can be from the main home. So I know that doesn't excite everybody, but you know, let's just cut our losses and leave at certain points and set expectations. So your property owner is going to go into the permit process just like the ADU is coming to town. You're going to start, once we know we have the green light, okay, you can do this on the property, the site assessment came back. At that kind of similar point, you're also working with the builder. Maybe you've already worked with the builder, got your designs. The designs are submitted to the building department. A lot of builders will want you to log into a design contract. If you're going through this process, I'm sorry for your builders in the room. Not really. It's good advice. So I'm not going to apologize for good advice. Do not build with them yet. Lock into a design contract with the builder. Once you have that building permit, you know that house can go there, then they can build your home. It's a safe space to be in. So there's a lot of conversations that happen between step 2 and, well, the last step. So just be mindful of that, and anyone who really wants to break this down more, I'm sorry, I can't get into the minutiae, probably a million questions of how things work. Every situation is going to be different, every site's going to be different, every relationship's going to be different, every hookup is going to be different, every size, minimum, maximum is going to be different. Maybe one day it'll be streamlined, we can only hope. And then once the building permit is issued, you're discussing who's paying for what, which actually probably should have come out earlier. The truth is the property owner should be putting in the initial investment to the services in your home. But we desperately wanted to live where we live, so my husband and I actually paid for everything ourselves. So we're like, well, we're just going to do this. We don't want another barrier to our dream. So we paid for it all, but the financial discussion will be all your own. Okay, where can you put a tiny home in Ontario? So, a few different places. You can put a tiny home in a seasonal recreational vehicle park. You're going to be looking for mobile home parks. A lot of these places are popping up. I'm going to give you a very, 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 very clear warning to do your research on parks, to talk to people who live there, to tour them, to look at them, to find out who owns them, and like who really owns them. And be aware, there are a lot of really beautiful parks out there. I have tons of friends, tons of previous clients who live in parks and are so happy. All they have to do is leave two weeks out of the year. That's the sacrifice they're willing to make for their dream. They're happy. I have a lot of clients, a lot of friends, and a lot of people I've been helping out in really, really shitty situations. And I'm sure a lot of you have seen a few of those things in the news. Don't always assume something is as good as it seems. Please do your research. Tiny home communities are popping up all over the place. Municipalities are building pocket communities all over the place. Because I'm in the industry, I see a lot of the things that are happening, and I'm part of a few of these projects. They're just not public yet. So I promise you, within the next year, a lot of these things are coming up. Municipalities are building pocket communities. They're paying for those things. Tiny associations are in projects and in talks. Multi-unit, detached multi-unit developments are coming. How to find them, what to do. We still need more time for them to actually be developed, for us to know that they're not a scam, and then for us to get them out there for people like you to actually get the opportunity to see them. Fire health houses. I wouldn't really beat this door down, but in some municipalities there's an opportunity or a discussion to be had. If you are an employee on a farm or an agricultural landscaper, you know someone who is, they can discuss with the property owner to build accommodations for them. I just am not sure whether or not that can be in a land leasing scenario yet, and I'm pretty sure the answer is no for that, but I like to kind of highlight that as an opportunity because I do talk to a lot of people who work on farms that say, I work on this farm, can I have a tiny house here? And then private land, the land leasing arrangement. Okay, so we talked about zoning, minimum size requirements, we talked about services and utilities and protected layers. So this is the due diligence. This is a really good quote. This is the due diligence lot of money spent up front to get to that point to just be getting a no. So, again, that's kind of your, okay, is the zoning there? Is there a detached additional dwelling unit or garden suite bylaw on the property? Okay. Next step, how big or small can I build my home? Or can I bring my home in? Then we're looking at services and utilities. On that property, how much is that going to cost you? In a site assessment, you can also get a services assessment. So what that means is they're going to assess how much it's going to cost to hook up the house. How much is electrical going to be? How much is sewage going to be? And then you have the other services. Ken, what are the other services? Sewage, water. Thank you, water. Thank you. Talk to me. Water. We're going to talk about all of the things, and the property owner is going to get an answer as to how much it's going to cost to host you. Then you can have a discussion about who's going to pay for that and how it's going to work out in your lease. But those are really important because if the services and utilities on the property are going to cost $75,000, well, guess what? The property owner is probably not going to want to do that. If the services and utilities are fairly straightforward and it's only going to cost maybe $15,000, you want to know how much it's going to be to do what you want to do on your property or on someone else's property. Protected layers is really important. This is your other highlight. Every time you're looking at a piece of property, whether you're buying or leasing anything, you want to know, is there a protected layer involved? Am I in a conservation area? Do I have a fjord or whatever they're called? I know we don't have those here, but is there something that's going to deter my project and bring it into really lengthy and costly processes? So if there is a protected layer on the property, you have to do more due diligence. Okay, where's the protected layer? Am I able to build far enough away from that protected layer, or is a municipality going to do a full environmental assessment? These are all important things that need to be done through that initial site assessment, which is why you need a builder who can do it, or you talk to a designer who can do it with you and for you. Don't just assume that because this property is there, that it's available. Cost considerations. So, everyone's going to look at this and be like, wow, Bianca, that's a spectrum. And it is. Because you can find someone to do an architectural drawing for you for relatively cheap. Someone might have a plan for you to buy. You can use that plan to shop it around to municipalities. It might have cost you $600. Or you might be working with an architect or designer and engineer who's designing a tiny house for way more than that. Or you're just working with a builder who has a plan and it costs nothing. Bill, I put $60,000 there because that's how much mine costs. But again, let's not use it as our benchmark. Tiny homes are traditionally around $150,000 and then they go up pretty much from there. There are a lot of really great builders who are coming out with products because they're mass manufacturing them now for a lot less. You're welcome to look at those builders, make sure they have the right certification. Permits and applications, it's a spectrum. It could cost $800 for the permit application process. It could cost $1 million for the application process. You just don't know. That's why you have to talk to the municipality, you have to talk to a professional. You have to get an answer as to what the process is on the specific property. Looks different in every single municipality for every single project. Well, not every single project, but every project will have its variances. A site prep. How much is it going to cost to get the site ready? You need a foundation. Are you doing helical piles? Do you have to anchor? Do you need a foundation and anchor plan? Those are all things that need to be assessed and paid for. Getting lines done, things like that. It costs money. Utilities hook up as well. I mean, you have to look at the site and you have to determine what it's going to cost. Like, I can give you a spectrum, but I'm not a trades person. I'm not a builder. I'm not a construction person. You need someone to look at the site, and I beg forgiveness for all of my ranges of months. Soft costs, the land lease cost. You're probably wondering, how much is this going to cost me to live? You have to discuss it. It's personal. But you also have to keep in mind that if you're living on somebody's property, especially someone that you don't know, they're going to want some money for that. It's going to cost something. It's not going to cost you $300. And maybe it will. That's great. Sweet. I pay nothing because I have a lot of sweat equity into the property. A lot of sweat equity. But some people might want $850. Some people might want $1,100. Some people might want $2,000. I mean, if they do, just walk away from that situation. But you might not, at the end of the day, find that this is an affordable housing solution for you based on the way you're going to get there. But for a lot of you, it will be. You have to assess the factors and you have to look at everything in a full spectrum. Okay, so we're winding down now, then I'm going to get into Q&A. 5 minutes? 10 minutes? 15 minutes? We're playing a game. Okay, so how do I help? What do I do? You're going to tell me everything you know, everything you think you know, and then everything you don't know. You're going to write down all your questions, we're going to sit down, and I'm going to take all of this melting pot of information, and I'm going to synthesize it down for you based on practical, legal, digestible at the end of it. Someone has pride at the end of the consultation. We don't know. Digestible, bite-sized pieces where you're going to take this big drink and you're going to finally have a next very clear path forward as to whether or not it's going to work for you, as to whether or not you're willing to do the work it takes to get there, whether or not you can afford it, whether you can get financing, which is not my forte, and all of the above. So a lot of people will meet with me and it's exactly what they expected. I'm like, yeah, I knew it was going to cost this much or this little or this is what was going to be the case. And a lot of people are like, okay, maybe this isn't for me for now. And that's okay. So we are going to do a bunch of things in that initial consultation, and mainly it's just talking about all the things. We're going to synthesize it down for you. If you want to move forward, then I'm going to help yourself find land leasing opportunities. Because now you have your very clear path. You have your step 1, and this is how it's going to work. Then you have your step 2, step 3 that are melted, and this is how it's going to work. I'm going to coach you on how to do things in harmony together. I'm going to basically hold your hand through that whole process and say, okay, you've talked to this person, let's look into the bylaws, let's do a lot of this. So you can hire me for coaching packages. That's kind of after the initial consultation, but let's get through the first phase, which is you learning the proper steps to take to do this, and also talking to perhaps people you already know who might know land. Then we get into the nitty-gritty. We talk about site work. We talk about how you work with a builder, then how it gets to site, how the bylaw works, what we look into first. There's so many different steps that I can very clearly outline for you, not in an hour presentation, but your project will very quickly become clear. So, from there, I send you to the professionals to do the job. So I'm not doing the design. I am not licensed for that, nor am I trained for that. I don't do the design, I do nothing. I send you to the professionals. So I work with a lot of people out here, specifically if you don't want to choose a builder quite yet, fine, choose a design. Choose a simple design that can be, made into a tiny house later. That's not fair. Just choose a design. You're gonna look at a design, maybe you choose a builder, maybe you get a stock plan, maybe you get all of these different things. That's where you're gonna start. And then again, we're gonna continue down the line and we're gonna make sure that the person you're using has the right design for the municipality. They're gonna do the site assessments, they're gonna come in and they're gonna do all of that work for the site. Then your builder is gonna be the one who takes over and does a lot of the work to get the house built and then to site. And then you have a team on site to help in the process of that. So it's a multifaceted approach, but you also have there are builders out there who will do the full turnkey process for you. So we'll do the needs assessment, we'll get into other fun different things. So turnkey key tiny house planning is what I help you with. I give you the kind of full spectrum of what you need to do, and then I send you the professionals to help you get there. So I do business-to-business consulting. I work with a lot of builders, companies for visibility to help you understand tiny homes, to go into the dense details that are this high-level stuff. And then from there, I send you to the professionals who can then sit down with you and say, okay, you want to design and build tiny homes or additional dwelling units, let's do it. And then I have just given you the entire spectrum of how people are buying them, what they're doing, how they're designing them, how they're using them, where you can sell them, and then you work with a professional to help you get there. And then from the business to client side, again, I coach you, I help you understand all your options, you get a clear path forward, and that's how that works. Okay, thank you. Okay, amazing. Let's do questions. My good friend Shay has.
And she does too.
Sophia has we have microphones. Who has a question for me? Yes. Oh. Yes. Thank you. So the question was, can I give any advice and feedback on how municipal day went? So yesterday we hosted a municipal conference day. We had about 50 municipal employees come out, planning departments, building departments, zoning departments, councilors, mayors from across the province, and it went really well. Everyone was very receptive to the panels, so we had 3 different panels. The first was zoning and planning, the second was building and certifications, and the third was affordable housing. So all the people in the room, they were there for a reason. They want to learn, they're interested. We were approached, myself and colleague Justin actually were approached by, for example, the county of Lambton, because they don't have an additional dwelling unit policy, but they do want one. They want it desperately, and they want it in their city, so, for their county. So there were a lot of huge pieces of advice that people got. One specifically was municipalities really need maybe like a concierge or a liaison for members of the public to understand the language of all the things. So language being, I'm not saying this is a tiny house, I'm calling it a modular unit. I did promise I would talk about that. Using, not calling and asking, can I do this, but calling and asking for the information, so that you can take that and you can talk to a professional before the municipality shuts you down for a project that you haven't used the right language for. So those were kind of the takeaways from that. For example, the township of Southwest Oxford, they are piloting a 10-unit tiny home community there, and it's municipal led. So I'm really hoping it's going to be the first one. They are trying to find projects that have happened like that around Ontario or in Canada, but someone has to be the first, so maybe they're going to be the first. So thank you for asking. It did go very well. It was really well received. Any other questions? Yes. They want to do that. You can get so far off grid, like many other dwellings. You could possibly have solar, propane, thermal energy, fireplace. So that's getting you, that's supplementing it as far as that. Unfortunately, the sewage part of it likely won't be something that would be approved. So the language you want to use would be, Justin, is a class 2 sewage system? Oh, so stay for the next presentation. Justin's going to talk about all of that. Yay! That's the Justin I was talking about. So if you have any questions at all about the technical things I was talking about, go ask him later. Yes, yes.
If I bought these plans, can I just put a tiny house on? Can that be my principal?
Yes, because the lowest minimum is 188. It can be the principal dwelling, but you're still restricted to what the municipality allows. So if you bought vacant land, you have to go through that 5-step checklist. The land needs to have the proper zoning for a single-family dwelling. Then you have to see what the minimum is, the minimum for the single-family dwelling that you can build. So if it doesn't have a minimum, usually that means you defer to OBC, which deferring to OBC means deferring to 188. Call the building department and ask them what the minimum is. That's the first question. Can you get this for me after, and I will send them to you. Yes.
How do you work? Like we have a team that works with you, or is it like a little bit logistic of that working with you?
Yes, so I don't have, I am my only employee. So I have those initial consultations and I run a lot of that initial project work, but then I send you to the professionals. So there's a few companies that I work with that I trust who have gotten people through the process. So while we don't work together because I like to own my time and take my summers off, I send you to companies that can do all of that. Yeah. Yes.
Yes, have you heard of a concept like co-housing, but only it's a tiny home concept? I'm interested because there are several single women, I understand, in a small community of land, but it would be the same idea as co-housing.
Yeah, so when we get into multiple unit properties, you're still subject to how they are traditionally zoned with municipalities, which is usually condominium zoning or park zoning, recreational vehicle park zoning. So you would still have to find a property that would allow multiple units. family, so while there's no picture, no project I can say, look at this and do this, it's all kind of still wrapped around the restrictions that you are limited to based on what is currently allowed in zoning, which anything that's a multi-unit properties, it's still condominium zoning, or a development that a developer has already made millions of dollars to do. That's why you don't see them done by the public, because the public doesn't typically have the funds to build those huge developments yet. But please keep on the nose with that. There are organizations and not-for-profits and people who are working on these things. Again, it's all just taking time. I know, a little faster, yes. One last question, and then I will be out there answering your questions as well. Yes?
Sorry, just to go back to the question that was mentioned at the front there. Why vacant land? Can you just put only a tiny home on there, or do you have to have a pre-existing bigger structure and then a tiny home in addition to that? Just wanted some clarification.
Yeah, sorry, I feel like I didn't repeat this lady's question, so thank you for asking again as well. So the question is, can you put the tiny home as the primary, the only building on the property, or does it have to be a secondary dwelling unit? The answer is yes, you can. But as I mentioned to this lady, you have to see what the minimum is, because a lot of municipalities still have high minimums for the principal unit on the property. So right now the minimums are usually between 8 and 1,200. But if they don't have a minimum, that means they defer to OPC. And if you did buy the land and they did have a high minimum, you can apply for a sizing variance to have something smaller. It just depends on where you buy the land. 188 square feet. So, yes, exactly. If there's no minimum, it's 188.